Whitney, how's it going today?
I am so good. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you could be here. You and I are in a similar situation, living this podcast life that we are. But hopefully, you
Right.
could just tell everybody just a little bit about yourself today and the focus of your business and your adventure that you're on right now.
Sure, sure. Well, I'm very distracted by your amazing background,
Oh, well,
first and
for
foremost.
you, anything.
I love it. Oh, that's funny. Well, so my name's Whitney Hansen. I am a money coach for millennials. I tend to attract more females into my audience, so that generally is who I focus on. So I help people live on a budget, pay off debt more aggressively than they could on their own. And then I do that in a lot of different ways too. So that's my main core of my business. I have a lot of free workshops, a podcast called the Money Nerds Podcast, where I interview cool people with cool money stories. And I blog a lot, have a YouTube channel. So that's kind of a little bit about the business side of what I do and how I work with people.
Excellent. Very cool. So you started to talk a little bit about the clients that you like to work with, mostly female, you said. What type of situations are they in when they come to you and say, Whitney, I need help?
Really bad situations. So it's one of those things where it's unfortunate, but for people to start to reach out for help, it's when they are feeling almost at rock bottom. And I hate that that's the case, but that does tend to be the people that reach out to me. So it's when they get to the point where they're like, I know what I should be doing, but for some reason I cannot do it. Like I'm just not sticking in my budget. I'm not getting results with my debt payoff plan. Something's always coming up. Life is always happening. My car's breaking down. What do I do? So those are the kinds of situations that I usually deal with. So it's much more cleanup control in a lot of ways. That's not saying that that's the only person I like to work with. That just naturally tends to be the people that reach out. So yeah, it's usually tons of debt, tons of credit card debt, student loans, unreal amounts of student loans, and then a little bit of consumer debt too, usually credit cards for sure.
So we call it coaching, like you said. I mean, it's almost
Hmm.
like physical training, or like we're starting the beginning of the year, and people are thinking, "Hey, I need to get in shape, man. I need to get healthy." It's kind of the same thing, isn't it?
Oh, it's completely the same thing. That's usually what I tell people too, is I'm like a personal trainer for your financial life. So it's very similar in approaches and the accountability and yeah, very similar, different industries, but very, very similar.
Very cool. And I guess I wanted to ask, how did you get inspired to do that? How did you get inspired to help people in that fashion?
Didn't expect it, man. Like it was something that I kind of stumbled upon. But I initially did what I thought was very, very normal. So I went to college, I did the whole 4 year degree, studied accounting, look for the most stable job you could probably ever have. I'm like, okay, I'm going to be an accountant. So I got into that. And right when I graduated, I realized that I wasn't really paying attention to how much debt I had accumulated because I was told, I bought into that whole lie of life's going to be better once you graduate. You're going to get that six-figure job. Don't sweat it. You can pay it off in no time. And so I was like, cool, I'll sign me up for that. So took out all the student loans, graduated 2010 with $30,000 in debt. And then that's when I had my little aha moment where I was like, crap, that's a lot of money. I've got to get rid of this as quickly as I can because for me, I could feel that was just, it was weighing on me. I don't really quite know how to describe it. And so I was working as an accountant and paid off the entire $30,000 in 10 months from my accounting job and my job in undergrad as a nail tech. So like manicures and
Nice.
pedicures. Yeah, dude, it was
So
crazy.
you were side
Uh,
hustling as the nail tech.
Side hustling as a nail tech. That was my job to get me through college. And I wanted to quit real bad, but it didn't make financial sense. I knew if I kept it a little bit longer, kept my lifestyle like a true college student,
Yeah.
then that would help me pay off that debt faster. So that's where I stumbled into the business was I started helping people on the side
Very
and
cool.
didn't even think that I could make money on that. I just didn't think that was a possibility. And then started to discover online entrepreneurship and coaching and was like, what is this world? Let's do this. And so that's where it all started.
There's lots of exciting people in this world, isn't there?
It's so impressive. It is constantly amazing me on what people can make money on. It's just amazing.
That's very exciting. Very cool. So how long have you been doing the coaching then?
About 3 years of the coaching piece,
Yeah.
and I've been doing the business with different variations for about four.
That's great. Very cool. And you said the 30K, was that all student loans or just built up of credit card debt, or what type of debt was that?
No, I'm not really a credit card kind of person, so that's not something I really buy into
Hmm.
as much. but it was all student loans. Like at one point I had a car, but it paid it off in a year and a half. And so it
Nice.
was very normal for me. But that's when that 30,000 was like, that's so much money. Let's put together a plan. So that, yeah,
And you
student
wanted to get
loans.
rid of it as fast as possible. You were just saying, hey, this $30,000 is holding me back.
Yeah, well, and so the cool thing too is what people don't quite realize is when you graduate from college, you've got that 6 month grace period where most people are just sitting back and saying, okay, I'll worry about my student loan payment in 6 months. I viewed that as like a really cool opportunity to make a little extra progress on my debt. So it wasn't 6 months where I was just going to chill out and drink coffee. It was 6 months of let's hustle until that debt payment kicks in. And even then, I think it's been so long now. I think it was like maybe $250 a month, but that's a lot of money. If you don't think $250 a month is a lot of money, good for you. But to me, that was life changing. And so I knew I wanted that to go towards my future instead of towards my debt.
There'd be a lot of people out there right now who would say, I'd love $250 extra per month.
For sure, right?
Well, very cool. You mentioned something about credit cards, and I wanted to dive into that with you today a little bit. You said credit cards aren't for me. Can you explain your philosophy on that?
Yeah. So when I turned 18, I got one of the little credit card offers in the mail. And it was a very basic card. I can't even remember what the name of it was. That's how bad this was. So I signed up and it was a $250 limit. And so for me, I was like, oh, $250. That's, you can't get out of control with 250. And so I would just use it for little things here or there, just for gas in my car, occasional groceries, coffee, whatever it might be. And what I realized is even at $250 a month, that was the limit, it was still so much money. It was really hard to pay it off. And so I started to realize how dangerous that cycle was. And frankly, it's not worth it for me. And everybody's like, well, what about the points and the cash back? Frankly, I ran the math. It really does not make much of a difference for me. Like, I don't make that much money on cash back. So that's my first initial reaction to credit cards. And I'm just not a fan.
So you had that, and then you just said, hey, this is not worth it. I'm not even going to go for it.
Not even going to go for it. No.
Okay, cool. So one thing that I have heard you speak about or write about is the ability to still maintain a decent credit score because, people might not want to use credit cards, but they still want to have a high credit score. So how can people get a high credit score without the credit cards?
It's actually a lot easier than you would think. And it's kind of roundabout because anytime you're building your credit, you have to use some type of credit. Unfortunately, that's the system. But that doesn't mean you have to go into debt and it has to consume your life. So what I recommend for almost anybody that's trying to build their credit is first and foremost, look at your situation. I have a house, I had a car loan, I had student loans. So I already had credit history. So for me, that piece was already there and it was already building up my credit score. But if you're brand new to credit, you've never used this stuff before, you're trying to get it maybe back on track, repairing, one of the best things you can do is to take out a credit card. I know, bear with me for a second. Take out that card, put like a reoccurring fee. So like your Netflix or Hulu account, just one. You don't need to do your whole life on the credit card. Put that onto the card, cut that card up and schedule an automatic payment every single month from your checking to that credit card. So it's automatically getting paid off. And if you look into like the numbers behind what your credit score is composed of, that actually boosts your credit just as much as putting $5,000 a month on that.
Really?
So it's really crazy because people think you have to charge huge amounts, but it's just about a little bit of usage and keeping that utilization number really, really low. So that's, I think, the best way to go if you're trying to boost your credit, but don't want to really mess with debt.
That's interesting. Okay, so it's funny that you mentioned that because I have one credit card right now with Capital One, I think, and I'm doing exactly that with my Spotify subscription. And that's the longest credit card account that I have. It's now that we just paid off our mortgage, it's the longest debt history that we have. So it's really interesting that you said that because I was wondering the other day, I'm like, well, is this going to count for my credit score if I'm just having $5 to $10 on it every month, but I'm consistently paying it off? So you're saying yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. As long as, because it's about history. Yes. Yeah. So if you're 18 and you've had that card for, I don't know how many years, say 10, 15 years, then yes, that's boosting up your score for sure. But then the other piece too is, again, that utilization ratio. So you don't want to, if you have a $2,000 credit card and that's your limit, and you're putting, I don't know, say $1,500 a month on that card,
Mm-hmm.
and you're paying it off, you're still using way too high of a utilization rate on
Mm-hmm.
that. It needs to be between 0 and about 20% on the
0
high
and
end.
20%. Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
What other factors are there in creating a high credit score outside of things like that?
The biggest one that I think most people understand is paying your payments on time.
Yep.
And frankly, that's like the greatest thing you can do for yourself. So just make sure you're paying those payments. Don't get out of control on that kind of stuff. The history is a big one too. So a lot of people will pay off a credit card and they're like, I'm closing that account. Peace out. But that's actually not so great, because when that happens, it looks at your overall, how much credit do you have available to you? So if you just paid off $1,000 credit card, your first inclination is, I'm going to get rid of that, closing it right now, buy Capital One or whatever card it is. And so when you do that, you're immediately reducing that overall available credit, which hurts your credit score temporarily. So that's the kind of piece that you have to worry about. Frankly, I mean, you can get real nerdy and you can do all the points and really try to rig the system there. And you can, however, I just don't think it's worth it.
Sure.
I mean, that's just not a life that I personally am a part of, but it
Well,
can
you've
work.
probably heard a lot of real life stories in your coaching business, how playing with credit cards doesn't pay. So do you have any insight you could share there?
Oh my God, so much. So one of the worst situations that I've ever seen was somebody that had $50,000 in credit debt. So this was multiple cards. However, they were behind on almost every single one of those cards. So it's, yes, you're behind on the credit cards, but then you're also paying late fees. And then you can't get ahead because you have to pay back payments, like seriously, $200-$300 each card. And so it just was really, really rough. And so for that person specifically, the interesting thing too is when people do pay off the credit card debt, they immediately are like, no more credit card debt, but then they start to bring the credit card back. And I think that's so fascinating because you don't need to do that. Like, credit cards don't have to be part of your life. It's a choice. And if you manage it correctly, it's great. But it doesn't necessarily mean you have to do that. So if you do struggle with credit card debt, pay it off, keep it gone, like leave it out of your life. It'll save you so much more in the long run. But that was a pretty bad situation.
Well, talk about some tactics for people who are trying to break free from the credit card and they maybe are getting close to paying it off. What do they do now? How do they live? How do they rent cars? How do they do the things that you're supposed to be able to do with credit cards? Talk to us about that.
I always love that too. They're like, well, how do I book I travel a lot personally, but people are always like, how do you travel with the debit card? You just do it. I mean, it's still money. Yep. So it's not really an issue. It doesn't cause a huge portion of issues. The time that it does cause problems is when you go to book a hotel. Sometimes they'll overcharge and hold your card just to make sure the money's there. That has put a kink in my plans before, but if you plan for it in advance, you're fine. So if you're getting to the point where you're ready to pay off credit cards, you're trying to pay off credit cards. Let's use advice for people that, let's say it's not in collections, so they're up to date on their payments. The best thing you can do is just focus in on one credit card at a time. And frankly, I mean, there's people that are like, oh, it should be the smallest, it should be the highest interest rate. I don't really care either way. Whatever works best for you. I personally like the smallest debt first. I think that's a good approach. But if you're a math person, you're like, the highest interest rate makes more sense, do that. That's okay too. But pay the minimum on everything and then put all of that extra money towards the smallest debt or the highest interest rate, whatever approach you choose. And then just keep cycling through. There's no secret, but every time you get extra cash, put that towards that debt. Your focus is that one debt at that time, not the overall picture, just that one debt. And I think that really simplifies it in our minds so we don't get quite so overwhelmed. But that's a really good place to start. And then if you choose to keep that card later, say it's a card that you actually do want to continue using, after you pay that credit card debt off, call the credit company and ask for a lower interest rate if it's a really high one. They are more willing to work with you if they see that you're being a responsible user of the credit, then they're more willing to work with you in that way. But be careful of that. That tends to be how, unfortunately, there's no secret. It's just put everything you've got towards that extra debt.
Yeah. And then, a lot of people want to do the right thing, and sometimes they just end up with all sorts of credit card debt, and the interest rate is piling up on them. Let's say, like you said, small manageable tasks, right? Don't try to get overwhelmed and do it all at once. let's talk about an action step that people can take. Maybe they're listening to this, they're like, man, I have got 3 credit cards and I'm paying late payments on them. I'm paying interest payments on them. It's just piling up. Where's just the best place to start so we can break it down for people in a small manageable task today?
Okay, so the best place to start is this is called the bank statement exercise. It's something I do with every one of my coaching clients, and it sounds real nerdy, but it works like a champ. So what you do is you print off a physical copy of the past 30 days of your transactions for your credit card statement and or your checking account. If you use both, you're going to print off both. And then what you do is you look at those transactions and you slightly identify what are the 3 areas that you tend to overspend on. So it's usually coffee, eating out, and some type of impulse buy. Amazon for the dudes. I don't know why that is, but it's usually Amazon.
We like our tech stuff.
It's so weird. Yeah. So it's your Amazon purchases. For the females, it's usually Target. It's so funny. It's like very, very worked out there. So you look at those 3 different transactions, those 3 categories. And then with the highlighter, you go through and you highlight every single transaction. And then you add it all up and you figure out how much did you actually spend on those different categories. For most people, that's enough of an aha moment where they start to switch things up naturally. You look at it. I had one gal that was like, I feel like I'm always broke. We went through this $800 a month on eating out. No joke. And so, yeah. And thankfully she had the income to support it. However, it's not saying that's $800 you could be doing towards something else.
Yeah.
And so then you can start to make those adjustments and you can start to create your budget based on what's it going to take to pay off that credit card. What areas can you reduce? What areas do you need to side hustle, make a little extra income with? But those are the places that I like to start with people.
Very cool. You mentioned the B word there, budget. So a lot of people think that is like super restrictive and we're not going to have any fun. I've tend to see it as the opposite, but that's because you and I are who we are.
We're nerdy.
Whitney. So why do you feel a budget is important in your life personally?
I think a budget is everything. To me, it's like you wouldn't go through your life without having goals and intentions and some type of a direction of where you're going. And if you do, you probably feel like life is just spinning and you can't catch up. So typically, a budget is basically that. It's your roadmap for what are you going to do with your money. And if you don't have a budget and you don't have a plan for what you're intending to do with your money, you're going to spend haphazardly. You're probably going to blow through savings. You might wake up at 50 and not have a retirement account. And then you're going to be pissed because you don't know where all your money went. Yep. So that's why it's so important to have a budget. And for those that think it's restrictive, usually if you feel like a budget is restrictive, it's because you're not spending in the areas that mean something to you. So you're spending on car payments when really you prefer traveling. Yep. So maybe you should get rid of that car and put that money towards traveling instead. Or you're spending on eating out and really you value your health or you think you value your health. Your spending habits may not support that. But that's usually when people say it's restrictive, it's just because they're not spending in the areas that they care about.
Yeah. Yeah, it almost needs like a new marketing term, right? Because the word budget just seems like cash flow planning. That's sexy. Ooh.
I'd like that. Nice job, man. Trademark.
There we go. Well, cool. Well, Whitney, you've been going on this personal adventure of paying off debt, helping people with their finances, helping them get out of credit card debt, learn to love the word budget.
Right.
So, as you were, progressing in your journey, business-wise, I guess just personally too, was there a book that influenced you in your personal finance journey to get where you are today?
I think the book very early on that influenced me most was David Bach's Automatic Millionaire. That one I read when I was 16 or 17.
Wow.
Super nerdy, I know. That one, Rich Dad Poor Dad.
You know who you're talking to, so you don't have to apologize. So
thank you. Thanks, guys. I appreciate the love there. the mutual understanding. Oh, yeah. But a book recently that I think everybody should read and has since creeped to my top #1 book for anyone is The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. It's really, really good.
I've heard that one. I've heard that a couple times from folks in our community. I definitely need to pick that up personally, but I'll put that one in the show notes as well as Automatic Millionaire from David Bach. We got to, I don't know if you were there for it at FinCon, but we got to hear him speak and present. That was really cool. It was like one of those moments for us money nerds to really dive in and enjoy. So You gave some great actionable advice for folks as they are trying to clean up some of their credit card situations or get themselves to live on a budget. Interested to know what's next for you financially in 2018. Have you set some goals for yourself that you're excited about that you'd be open to sharing today?
Yeah, so I just set my business goals. So most of my goals revolve around business at this stage. My personal life is pretty boring financially. It's already set up, so it's not really that sexy anymore. But my business goal that I'm really working towards is to hit $200,000 in revenue for 2018.
Wow.
And so I think I can do it. It's a bit of a stretch goal, but that's one of the big ones. And to do that, I currently have a 9 to 5 job as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I am officially jumping ship after 3.5 years of building the biz.
When is this happening?
February 1st is the official last day for me.
Oh, congratulations, Whitney. That's
Thank
such great
you.
news. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. By the time this comes out, it's going to be post February 1st. So I'm going to say congratulations today. Way to go.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a lot of hustle to make sure I had the income to support it before I jumped ship. So it's taken some time, but it's really exciting.
That's incredible. That's incredible. So when you started the business side of it 3 years ago, you were starting from scratch, right? And now you've made it almost to your goal is 200,000 this year. That's amazing. So that built over those 3 years.
Yeah, first year in business, I made $1,500.
Nice.
I was like, oh, dang, that's nothing.
Wow. Well, that's
But
incredible.
it was a good start.
Well, you're developing a business for yourself as well as helping a lot of people out there. How many clients do you think you've worked with over the years to help them with their finances?
Over the years, I mean, it's definitely well over 400 individual clients, but I have courses too. So it's thousands at this point. So it's pretty fun to see it grow.
That's incredible. Well, congratulations on your success, and thank you for sharing that big news with us today. That's very cool. Where can people learn more about you? Maybe partner up with you as a coach or take one of your courses. Where's the best place to find Whitney Hansen?
Yeah, the best place is whitneyhansen.com. And if you're listening to this podcast, you obviously like podcasts. So go check out the Money Nerds and you can subscribe and listen to some cool money stories to help you along your journey too.
Excellent. Yes, Whitney and I are in this little mastermind group together trying to figure out how we can be successful with our podcast and give you all the best value possible. So thank you all for listening today. And if you're on YouTube, thank you for watching today. We appreciate you jumping in. Thank you so much, Whitney.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.